UFC 266 is in the books, and we are live. Damn, those were some fights. Those were some crazy fights. Good to be here with everybody. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the card tonight. I would say definitely one of the best cards of the year for sure, and we might have multiple entries from across the card for round of the year. The Merab fight, Diaz fight, Volkanovski main event. You might be able to pick a couple rounds out of the Ortega Volkanovski masterpiece of a fight, even though Volk won it convincingly. I almost said even though there was not a moment that Ortega looked like he was out of it, but that's crazy. There were several moments Ortega looked like he was out of it. In fact, I couldn't quite hear the doctor at the end of the third round coming into the fourth round. It seemed like he said to Herb Dean, I don't think he can go on. And that's when Herb jumped in and started throwing up his digits saying, can you at least see my fingers? Can you see my fingers, Brian? He gave him every opportunity, and Ortega did seem a little out of it, but as soon as the round started, he was on. Round 4 and round 5, I didn't see Ortega winning either of those, but the 5th round, he came the closest. But Ortega really, from a striking standpoint, he had his most success as far as impactful strikes. Amazing. Amazing. Let me know how the stream is looking. I'm actually on the side of the mountain in the compound broadcasting tonight. I've got some new trickery with the internet, so we'll see. I've been doing tests all week, and they say they're good, but let me know if there's any issues with the quality of the stream. I'm not running any videos tonight, so it should be pretty good. I will be taking calls here in a little bit, taking questions and comments out of the comment section. Gentlemen of the chat, good to see you all, and ladies. Just looking, seeing what folks are saying. Skydron said, yeah, the Aussie. Well, those of you who've been around for a while know I've been big on Volkanovski for a long time. His first interview, it was before he was in the UFC, he did with Ariel Helwani, and there was just something about the dude. I've gone back and tried to find that, but I've been unable to find the archive of that. He had, Volkanovski has a black belt in mental approach, strength, all of those things. Clearly on display in those 2 submissions that were, well, attempts, but you can pretty much call those submissions because anybody else is tapping or going out, and Volkanovski just wasn't going to have it. He might have gone out if Ortega could have squeezed a little harder or whatever, but there was no doubt that Ortega was putting 100% into it, so there was no give on Ortega's end as far as those submissions attempts went. Amazing. Just an incredible fight, and great to see for both guys. They're very different, and perhaps I'm the only bastard who watched their tough season. Everybody's, particularly on the media side of things, very happy to pronounce that they didn't watch a moment of the tough series. And I haven't watched it seriously in a very, very long time. most recent ones that I've watched, all the episodes, goes back to DC and Stipe, but that was after the fact. Right in the lead up to their rematch, I watched the Tough series. And then I did watch all of the Volkanovski and Ortega because it was the first chance I felt that I was going to be able to get a real look at Ortega, particularly. Because he's not a dude that does a lot of interviews, and it's tough to get inside the world of Brian Ortega. Somebody needs to do a serious documentary on Ortega. Get inside his circle and spend weeks or months or maybe a year off and on with the guy, because there's a lot going on with Ortega, for sure. A lot of good things. And my first thought as soon as the fight was over was, how goddamn good would Brian Ortega be if he was just professional? All right. Go Flamingo says never on time to his own streams. Hey, I was on time for this one, as much as anybody can be. I didn't wait for a lot of streams go apparently after the press conference. I pretty much just had to switch the generator over, take a piss, and make sure there was enough wood in the stove to keep me warm as long as we go tonight. Adam Banana says hello. And Nico asks if there's any sleepy Euros. Well, yeah, I would imagine the sleep might not be hitting them quite yet, but it shan't be long. Anybody that stayed up from over there for these fights is going to be jacked for a little while, and then the crash shall come. Eric Shost says Ortega is going to wake up tomorrow feeling dead. Yeah, for sure. There were a few times he looked damn near there and then kept coming back. Amazing stuff. Volkan Ulz killed it tonight. Respect for sure. They're saying it looks perfect. Great. Everything I can tell on my end, it says I've got an excellent connection. So hooray for the internet from not quite the outback, but damn close. If you do have any questions, go ahead and throw them up in the chat section, and I will definitely get to them. I'll run through some of the fights on the card, give some of my impressions, and take calls. And probably about 15 minutes, open up the phone lines. Just want to go through some of the basic impressions from the fights. I was starting with the main event. I gave some of my impressions. I came late to the broadcast. I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to watch it tonight, as I normally do watch fights Sunday mornings rather than live, just because of my situation with the internet. But like I said, it's been going well, so I was able to do it. I wasn't able to see all the fights on the undercard. I basically was able to jump in with the Jalen Turner and Uric. It's not Uric. I'm trying to remember. Uros Medic. Medic. I know I'm not saying it right. It looks like Medic, but he calls himself the goddamn doctor, so I'll just go with Medic right now. Anyways, I'd circled that fight, the Medic-Turner fight, as a major potential for fight of the night. Ended up not being able to be in that competition, partly because Turner was so much more dominant than I expected him to be able to do with Medic, but nonetheless, a very good fight. Getting back to the main event, and very good scorecards for Volkanovski. Good to see that he was recognized for the dominance that he did have. I think sometimes when an opponent who is showing a lot of heart and there's a little bit of it's hard not to pull for the fighter who's getting the worst end or the worst end of one-sided traffic, particularly when it's mostly with the striking, even if it's ground and pound. People, I think the natural tendency is you don't want to take away from the positive things you see from Ortega. So it was good to see that there was, I think, proper representation of what was actually happening out there. Volkanovski's gotten a little bit of short shrift, partly because of Chael Sonnen. In fact, I would say a good 20 to 30% of Volkanovski's disrespect or lack of proper appreciation comes from Chael. And I don't know that it's necessarily intentional. A lot of people feel that Holloway won the second fight, and that fight was so close. I think that's reasonable. It's one of the great fights you can argue. But the second fight, while it was very competitive, from a scoring perspective, it wasn't that close. So good to see Volk not just get the respect from the fans with what they saw with their eyes, but also with the judges' scorecards. I was a little bit worried about Volkanovski because as a pattern guy, I'm always looking for patterns. I don't even look for them. I just see patterns. And Volk was really vocal, no pun intended. The closer the fight got, the more he wanted to really push the narrative of Ortega beyond being unprofessional, really essentially saying, and sometimes literally saying, the guy's going to quit. He's a quitter, or he's going to, when he gets in there with me, he's not going to be able to stand up to it. He's weak. And after the fact, Volkanovski intimated that some of that was head games, and I buy that. It was definitely out of Volkanovski's character. What bothered me or concerned me for his performance tonight was that he came out so ebullient, so happy and in the moment from the walkout and the introduction in the cage. To me, when you see a fighter so outside of their own character, now maybe he's just coming into his own and feeling confident, and that's all good. You want to see evolution mentally as well as technically and physically in your fighters. But when you see such a hard turn in one direction like that, to me it throws up potential red flags. It wasn't until it came to the actual face-off, Herb Dean brings him in, gives the fight instructions, and they touch the gloves. Volk got more serious then. It was also kind of an interesting moment, too, because you could tell Ortega didn't expect to touch gloves. From all the shit that Volkanovski was slinging, Ortega probably rightly thought, well, yeah, this dude doesn't respect me. He doesn't want to touch gloves, so I'm not going to put it out there. So when Volk did put his glove out there to touch, you could see Ortega said, that's kind of surprising. Which also made me wonder if Volkanovski was playing the game a little bit of shifting emotions. We saw that at the end of the second round in particular, where Volkanovski stood right with him. And I wasn't sure if he was still trying to play mind games at that point or just stalling to keep Ortega from being able to go back to his corner, thus cutting off 5-10 seconds of his resting time. Or if he was just emotional and in the moment and, feeding on that. It's you couldn't know without putting some of those questions to him directly. But a very good result for both fighters, I thought. Ortega has evolved, and Jesus, you couldn't be more excited to see either of these guys fight. Ended up, even though the delay from their first matchup originally before that fell through, and then you had to wait the whole damn time for the tough thing to go through and then to play on TV, I think it was worth it. It certainly built up the fight really nicely, and the press conference was good. Volkanovski hitting him with the drug cheat thing that it seemed to hit Ortega by surprise. I don't know how much it bothered him. Within a moment or two, he seemed to be at peace with it. But it was just one more instance of Volkanovski playing more levels. And he's definitely a smart guy. And I would imagine being around Izzy and his coach and his other coaches from Australia. Maybe shouldn't be too surprised that Volkanovski was starting to play a little bit of the mind games. Plus, he's trying to get more traction. He's champ. This is now his second title defense, but third championship fight. He's on a 20-fight winning streak, and he feels like he's not getting enough. I don't know even if it's the respect. That's just the easiest word to use. He's not getting enough traction with the fans to really start making more and more money. So good on him. He's trying different things. And again, Ortega, the guy is classy. They're both classy, just in different ways. It's sort of a clash of cultures. And you could see the mutual respect between the guys after the fight, which was great to see. Sorry there, I got something in my throat. Check out a couple questions. Tyler says Volkanovski is freaking special, y'all. Yeah, definitely. He is. And to get out of those chokes, particularly, I thought there was no way. The triangle, the triangle seemed so tight, but that guillotine was just, I think it was as in as well as it could be at that stage of the fight. I don't think Ortega could have done anything different. And we know Ortega's not one of those guys who misses his chances. When he gets you like that, it's his best effort. He just wasn't able to get it against Volkanovski in that moment, which is tip of the hat to Volk on that as well. Wayne Chin asks, what do you think about Herb giving Ortega time to recover? Yeah, that was interesting. The first time was going into the fourth round. A little more understandable because the doctor was in there. And again, let me know in the comments or when you call up here in a couple minutes if anyone else thought they heard the doctor equivocating a little bit. Seemed like he was saying to Herb, perhaps Ortega isn't quite ready to continue the fight. And that's when Herb stepped in. That one to me was more understandable. Why Herb brought the doctor back in again, I think that's another indication of Herb just being really insecure in his authority. To me, I go back to some of the great boxing referees, Mills Lane. He really took charge. And to me, a guy like Mills Lane or a Keith Peterson, who keeps showing how good he is. I've been saying for a while, I thought Peterson was becoming one of the top 3 or 4 refs. And I think decision by decision that he's making in the cage as he's getting higher profile fights to referee, he's showing that he has real good management of what's going on in there. And Herb, he's thinking too much. He's a little gun shy. He's like a fighter who's just been hit a few too many times and doesn't want to take the heat for making a mistake, but more than that, with Herb, I take him as very authentic, and when he's at his best, he's still one of the best referees. And fortunately tonight, it didn't affect the fight. There was a moment when Ortega, I think it was in the 4th round, it wasn't one of the close submissions he grabbed, but there was a moment where he was close to the cage and he was able to spin, and Ortega completely interlocked his fingers into the cage and pulled himself around and got his legs up. Volk was able to pull out of it, but at that moment, if Ortega was able to sink it in because of getting the leverage with the cage, there's no way Herb Dean is going to jump in and stop it. Stop the position because of the advantage of the cage. It's just he doesn't want to have an outsized effect on the fight. Herb's real. So to answer the question, I think Herb brought in the doctor before the 5th round simply to cover his own ass because he didn't want to make a mistake, which is understandable on one hand, but you need to, especially in the big fights. It's one thing when you're managing 2 classy fighters. They're both going to give it 100 and maybe 110% if you include putting your toe over the line a little bit. They're both going to push the line, but they're both honorable fighters. You get a Yoel Romero in there, and I don't know, pick another fighter who plays loose with the rule set, and Herb Dean is not the ref you want in there. Flamingo says, sounding fresh, good. That's good. Kano says, who won? Yeah, anybody have money on the fights? I don't really bet too much anymore. It's such a different mindset. But from the way I normally look at fights and do my kind of research looking into the buildup of a fight, it'd be a completely different way of going about it if I was putting money on the line. Because you're looking at a completely different set of factors. So anybody cash some big tickets? To me, outside of Shevchenko, the one fight that I would have felt confident putting pretty much any amount of money on was the Andrade Cynthia Calvillo fight. That to me was easy money at any price. And that's not to slight Calvillo, just she never, Calvillo just never panned out. And I'd never seen what other people, like Luke Thomas, I remember the year she had 3 wins in 1 year. And Luke was, of course, he's got a big thing for Latina grapplers. I mean, let's just be honest about that, old donk. We know his predilections, and hey, nothing wrong with that. We all have a flavor and a setting that we like. My guess is, asphyxiation is something he might see in his future if he were to if he were able to have his his fantasy camp realized with Tatiana Suarez or a Cynthia Calvillo. But to be fair to Calvillo, even though the fight didn't go long, the real problem that she had is she couldn't get respect for herself. She just doesn't have enough power or enough offensive wrestling against a bull like Andrade to get the respect that she needed. So it was an eventuality that fight was going to end before the 15 minutes expired. But I was impressed, and to me it's the first time in Calvillo's career that she seemed truly confident in her stand-up skills. It's funny when it's such a one-sided fight, and occasionally you see those where a fighter just kind of gets shellacked, or bull rushed, yet a lot of positives to come out of it. Next question. Folks are saying watch the Tough series, but skipped all the hoopla. Yeah, I think that's the universal assessment of Tough. Nobody wants to watch the bullshit, all the fake pranks and all that stuff. If you have a real charismatic fighter in there, like when they had Conor and Uriah, Uriah he's a charismatic guy. Fortunately, he had enough teammates with him that could create friction with Conor and his team. Because, Uriah is just, unless he's talking about Cruz, he's not big on personal friction like that. So you pretty much have to have some authentic friction for the back and forths to have much meaning. They definitely need to revamp the format of that show. I think it's too difficult to do it from a lot of perspectives live the way they did the one season, which I thought was one of the better seasons. But that might be a way to go if they could figure it out logistically. What's the phone number? Yeah, let's get the phone number going so y'all can call. There we go. 206-276-8384. Dial those. We'll go through a couple more questions here and start taking some calls. Go Flamingo with a big donation. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Always good to hear your breakdowns. Diaz weirdly quit. Yeah, let's talk about that. Val is better than Amanda. Hooker has the best call outs. Bless you, Flamingo. Good to see you again here as well. And thank you so much for the donations. Really feel kind of strange getting donations when I'm not at a place where I'm doing it regularly. At that point, I think it'd be great. It'd be a help, but it's a help for sure to get some of those. We do have a call. Let's go ahead and take that. Hello, you are live. What's your name and what are you thinking?
What's up, brother? You hear me?
I can. Loud and clear.
Okay. I got to say, Volkanovski gridded that one out big time. What a tough guy, man. Hopefully he gets the respect he deserves now after showing his heart, even though I don't think he needs to. I think he already proved himself in the two Max Holloway fights. Now, getting out of submission against a Henry Gracie black belt with the most dangerous submission game arguably in the UFC.
Yeah.
That was impressive. That was hardcore. But man, gotta say, the Slavic people, they're showing up and they're showing out and they're representing.
Oh,
Alexander Usyk from Ukraine and Volkanovski, the Macedonian from Australia.
Yes.
These dudes are built different. You talk about the Africans, Nigerians, and whatever, Nagano, where he's from, but
yeah, Cameroon.
These Slavs, there's something else. Whether it be Jan Blachowicz from Poland, my Polish kinfolk, or it's Peter Yan, a Russian, Volkanovski. They're cut from the same cloth. They are cut from the same cloth. So I gotta say, man, big shout out to the Slavic people.
Absolutely.
Ukraine, Usyk, huge win against Joshua. I gotta say, I was more excited for that fight. I'm usually never more excited for a boxing fight over a UFC fight, but it was big time, that heavyweight main event.
What happened? I didn't even get to. I was doing 10 things while trying to watch just the UFC card. I knew they were fighting. How did it go? What happened?
It was just Usyk just totally. It was footwork. It was his activity, his cleverness. Outboxed him, hurt him multiple times.
Wow.
Joshua kept him honest. He stung him with some shots, but he never folded. He never got like visibly rocked or his legs did a chicken dance or anything. He kind of got buzzed once or twice, but he just pitched up. Fought a beautiful fight.
So Usyk won by decision.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not easy to do.
Almost had him out of him.
When you have those,
almost had him out of there too. They
really
were so close to knocking him out at the end of the fight, but yeah.
Must have been a clearly impressive performance, because you get those big money makers in boxing, man, and you don't win those decisions unless you win by a decent margin. Normally,
exactly. That's what I said. I said if you got he put a hurting on him, it would have been a riot if they robbed him. Going into England, outboxing him clearly, so there's no way they're gonna rob him.
Right.
But let's talk about these fights. I gotta say, Volkanovski, he should be up there pound for pound, top maybe fourth now. I have him ahead of Ngannou. I think Usman.
Yeah, that's where I'd put him, is right maybe one below Usman, just because Usman's been there in that position a little longer, and it's hard to take it away from Usman since he's developed. Now, part of that is how does he...
Another beast. So, Volkanovski, he's just one of those guys. He doesn't get the respect. They kind of downplay him. Not really a big household name, but this dude is a beast, no doubt about it. I think, I don't know, it's hard to deny him. I got to put him way up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts on some of the other fights? What was another fight? Any other fights?
What was definitely interesting to me was that Daukaus kid.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the two brothers, and I thought he might be the lesser of the two brothers, and I expected Abdurakhimov to sort of bull his way through it, because I always saw Chris Daukaus as since he hasn't been in the UFC very long, and he doesn't have that many fights in his career overall, he seems a little bit paunchy, and he's got some technical savvy, but I just didn't think he'd be able to hang with Shamil, and he certainly did. He had his moments, but when it came to it, the funny thing is he's got one of those frames, Daukaus I'm speaking of, where he just seems to be able to land heavy shots, even though it doesn't look like he's throwing crazy hard. And his brother has a similar frame and has had some similar success.
Yeah, I said the same thing. I thought his brother had all the hype. His brother, he was like undefeated. He had this hype, and then he kind of he took a couple of losses. But Daukaus is the one making the noise now, and I agree. I thought Shamil, I just thought it was like, this is a big step up. Shamil, he's been around the block, but then there were some tough guys. I thought it was a bad matchup. I just thought Shamil would be tough, but dude destroyed him. Then the referee, I can't stand that dude, Mark Smith. I can't stand him. Even when he did with that Peter Yan situation.
Yeah.
Oh, don't get up. I'm going to disqualify him.
Yeah, that was not his shining moment, Mark Smith. He to me, he's up and down. I mostly like Smith, but he gets out over his skis sometimes.
Yeah, that situation, it was just obvious what was going on. He was looking out for Sterling. For whatever reason, you do the math, but...
Well, I think in the moment, he was so offended by the illegal strike because it was beyond egregious that it sort of overwhelmed him. And then he didn't really get his I'm speaking Mark Smith. He didn't get his composure back. He just kept going forward with that emotion of what the hell are you doing? You just need a guy who's clearly down. And if Smith would have handled the situation better before the knee, because what was Aljamain Sterling doing? Not to go off on that tangent after such a amazing card that we had tonight, but to me that was the bigger issue, is that he should have been warning Aljamain for squirrely behavior. He was putting himself in danger.
Sterling. Strip his ass is what they need to do. But yeah, Mark Smith, I don't like him as a ref. He kind of just came out of nowhere. Now he's getting all these big fights. Like, it used to be like Mark Goddard would be in there, and then it would be like Herb Dean, and now it's like Mark Smith's in the mix now, and all these big fights. But my other the last notable fight on the card has to be. Let me think about it. That Jalen Turner win, that was a nice win against
very
Medic.
good.
And the thing with Medic, though, he was kind of unproven. Like, he had a lot of hype. Like, he was the favorite, but you got to think, Turlin, he's been in there with Vincent Luque, Travola, Carlo. I mean, Medic, he's coming off the Contender Series, beat a guy who lost 2 fights in a row and got knocked out of the UFC, kicked out. So he was kind of unproven, and they're hyping this dude up like he was some hot shot, but he's unproven. But that was still, he went out there and made short work of him like he's supposed to. Those are the 2 notable fights that come to mind. I'll leave you to it. Thanks for taking the time.
All right. Thank you so much, man, and talk to you again.
Yeah, you too.
All right. So there we go. Yeah, good call. Yeah, definitely some interesting fights lower down on the card as well. Getting back to the question about Diaz weirdly quitting. Think about Nick, though. He's always talked about, he has more of the boxing mindset, where if you've got a fighter that's damaged enough that he's not going to be able to either be competitive or win the fight, you throw in the towel. And was it the Josh Thompson fight? The one time that Nate was knocked out, it was a TKO, but he was really hurt. And the ref jumped in, but just as the ref was jumping in to stop it, Nick threw the towel over the cage and into the octagon. So that's Nick's mentality. I didn't have a problem with that. To me, it didn't look like a quit. And, part of it is Diaz is a legend. I'm going to cut him some slack. I mean, haven't we all cut him slack just to help him feel comfortable enough so he'd get back in the octagon if that's what he wanted to do? So I think we should cut him slack. It didn't feel like a quit if you're going to judge this versus GSP tapping to strikes. Some pretty great fighters have quit. And again, I'm hard pressed to say what Nick did tonight and put it in the category of quitting. He how best to put it? To me, he did it in an honorable way. And of course, in a couple days, because he's a Diaz brother, he's going to have a very good argument in his own mind of how he actually won the fight. But I think we're all comfortable with that too. That's part of the Diaz charm. And I was surprised at how good the fight was. I thought Lawler was, if you were going to bet that fight, that was the only bet you could put, because how could you know what Nick Diaz was going to show up? Well, we should have known, right? Or I should have known. When you are as pure an element, undisturbed by change, undisturbed or unperturbed by fluctuation, like Nick Diaz is, that's a guy who's the same today as he is tomorrow. Now, he has a fairly wide spectrum of behaviors, but he's essentially the same guy. That's what keeping it 100% is all about, right? I mean, that's his ethos. He wears that on his sleeve. And I think he was giving credit to Robbie Lawler. He didn't steal. When he first stayed down, for that instant, I thought, oh, he's going to try to steal some of Robbie's thunder by not letting him get the true TKO. But he didn't at all. And you saw the respect between from Lawler to Diaz and back as well. To me, that's what's great about MMA. We're going through a period where we have all these crazy celebrity fights and everything. And to me, some of those are fun matchups. Some of them are embarrassing. I'm not against them, but it's crazy to me when you have a Jake Paul fight and half of the MMA media is only talking about how great the business model is of the Pauls and how helpful they are to fighter pay, when at best you could say is they've helped 2 or 3 fighters get a good payday. When you have a solid organization like the UFC or even Bellator, which they don't pay their lesser fighters very well. They're pretty poor with their undercard fighters. But both of those organizations and a lot of regional organizations, they're doing the real hard work and being solid organizations, because that's what produces fights like we saw tonight. If you don't have a deep, stable, sustainable organization, you don't get fights like the Abdurakhimov fight. You don't get, because you don't have enough depth, and the guys that come in are fighting, I don't want to say nobodies, but they're fighting retreads or guys who really shouldn't be at that level. So in that way, I think you do need to, once in a while, tip a cap to the organizations that are doing things well. All right. Let's see if we get another call in here. Go ahead and give a call. I've got the number on the board. The stream seems to be going fine still. A little nervous because of the internet, but it seems to be running strong, so that's great. The number is 206-276-8384. So yeah, just to finish up on Diaz, I thought he showed himself well. It was a little bit, I was worried of having flashes of Nick versus Anderson Silva. The way that fight starts, though, Nick comes out and throwing that spinning reverse heel kick or whatever the hell that was going to be, wasn't pretty. I think he was just being strange, just putting things off kilter. That's the way he rolls, and he made a very good account of himself. I know there was a lot of hand wringing about, it's so funny. Some of the usual gaggle who have been in the game, in the press game for more than a decade, some of them going on 12, 15 years, do they forget who Nick is? I think people get confused between Nick and Nate. They're very different. Nate doesn't have a social anxiety issue. Nick does. Nate is very standoffish. He's used to playing the second fiddle. He's comfortable. He's very comfortable playing a support role. So he's not the kind of guy who's gonna light up the cameras for a bunch of interviews purely because that's not his game. But anytime you see Nate fairly comfortable, he's just fine in interviews. Where Nick, it doesn't matter how comfortable you make him, he can't even concentrate on a question being asked him if somebody's fidgeting halfway across the room. I mean, that's a guy who's having a real, honest-to-goodness problem controlling his anxiety. I mean, that's a very clear sign of that. So when Nick is talking in the lead up to the fight, it's more understandable. He's going to say some crazy things because he doesn't have, for the most part, and this is a generalization, but he doesn't have a filter. Once he's so hesitant to talk, it's almost like a dam. You hold back the water and you hold back the water, and then when it bursts, just everything's coming through. You can't control it. The logs are coming over now and all the water, and it's all muddy and crazy. That's how Nick is during a conversation. So he'll say things, he might have something formed and ready to say, but once the dam bursts, anything he's ever thought might pop into his head and he says it. And if you take time to sift through what he's saying, most of what he says is actually logical. And it makes sense. It's just wildly out of context. You get a little bit of that with Tony Ferguson. He's got so many other layers of things that he's doing as well with conversation, and he's very visual. He jumps from topic to topic, and he connects them a lot of times metaphorically, visually. And Nick isn't doing that at all. But it's similar in the sense that he can jump from topic to topic, and a normal listener, that's not how we normally communicate with each other. Of course, the co-main event, or as they called it, the second feature, with Shevchenko versus Murphy. Murphy was next woman up. It's a weak division, and you happen to have one of the best female fighters ever in the weakest division in the UFC, and it's what you're going to get. The thing that struck me initially in the fight was just how much more power Shevchenko was putting into her striking early in that fight. I thought that was pretty interesting. I was wondering, she was fighting like she had something to prove almost, and Jesus, she's got nothing to prove compared to anybody else. Her standing is so solid, but it must be something she does to motivate her. I think the way she changes locations, because she has a mobile training camp. She's got that one dude who's the coach, and he's been coaching her and her sister, since they were in utero, basically. And you never hear anything about that guy. It's almost a little creepy if it wasn't so successful, and if the sisters weren't so well-rounded and full of vigor outside of they're not just. It's not a situation where you had the gymnastic coach Bella Caroli, where he'd get these young athletes, these young girls, and he would just mold them, but then when he was done molding them into champions, they were basically broken because he molded them so hard. There's something really cool going on, it seems, though, with Shevchenko's training scenario, because she goes somewhere different for every camp. I remember for one fight, she was in Maine, just some weird backwoods part of Maine. She wasn't even in one of the 2 or 3 towns that have people in it. And for this training camp, she was in my neck of the woods. She was up in the north end of Puget Sound in Salish Sea, on the islands. I mean, there's no established training facility up here. I'm sure she found some accommodation. It's pretty much she could be on the moon with her sister, 1 or 2 training partners, and that crazy guy who's her coach who takes no credit, and she would prep like the goddamn champ she is. There was never a lot of hope for Lauren Murphy. Pretty much her claim to fame, I guess. She's definitely, I could imagine Joanna Jędrzejczyk envying Lauren Murphy, despite the amount of success Joanna has had. But I also wondered if maybe Shevchenko had a little bit of a chip on her shoulder because people were making such a big deal out of Jennifer Maia winning 1 round against her. I wondered if it left her just a little bit salty, which again is when you're nitpicking like that, I think that's one of the important mindsets of a transcendent champion, or just a very high performing athlete. All right. Any other questions here? And the phone line is open if y'all want to call. And I do want to give a little bit of love to Robbie Lawler as well. It's been a long time since he looked that good. And let's be fair and honest about this. Diaz completely gamed the system. He knew he was not going to make 170 pounds. Of course, they're not going to talk about that on the broadcast, nor should they. But it is fair for us to talk about it now. You can only imagine the reaction. I don't think either Diaz brother would have taken a fight under those situations. If Lawler had come in and clearly planned to not make the weight, and Nick wouldn't, very unlikely he would have stayed with the fight. And to me, that's just about as close to cheating as you can get. I guess maybe you could call it Dundasso because he got away with it. That was kind of shady. And seeing Nick out there with the Diaz dad bod, I was a little concerned for him before the fight started as well. But clearly, he had the cardio. He had the ability to. His chin was good. It was the body shots, of course, that started to really impact Diaz. And at first, Robbie came out so hard, I wondered if he was getting drawn in, sort of baited in, a little bit the way he was the first time. And you never know. God knows what goes on in Robbie's head. We've never known. I don't think we ever will know. I like to guess that it's a lot more than what we can imagine. To say he keeps it close to the vest is a tremendous understatement. The dude lets nothing go, and his answers are always the same in press conferences or whatever. Just perhaps that goes back to the days with Miletich, and you keep a strong mind by not letting other bullshit get in there, and it certainly works for Robbie. But to me, this was Robbie classic. He was in classic form. This is the Robbie Lawler from the Condit fight, or the Rory McDonald fight, because once Nick started to turn things around in the first round, it was reasonable to expect that Lawler wasn't going to be able to hold up to it. And to me, it was a little bit like a big old bear just swatting at bees with all of Nick's punches, hundreds and hundreds of punches in under 3 rounds. Amazing stuff. And by that middle of the second round, you could really see that at that point, Robbie was starting to understand the speed and some of the angles and the length of the combinations from Nick, and was doing a much better job of covering up. And it was a little surprising that when the fight ended, Robbie looked pretty clean. He definitely took some shots and took some big ones from Nick, because he was turning up the power towards the end of the fight as well. But Robbie carried through, and very excited to see what he does from here on out. That hasn't always been the case over the most recent run for Robbie. Not saying he's put himself right back in the title mix like Nick suggested in the presser, but for sure he's made himself relevant again, and good for him at 39 years old. All right. What's Michael Vila says, what's Nick's next fight? I don't know. He did seem to want one, though. And I liked his answer. He showed a lot of spirit and was very positive when he said, yeah, if I get my ass kicked out there, I'm definitely coming back. And he was mostly upbeat. He kept saying he wasn't going to make any excuses, and he didn't. He seemed to be stuck on this idea of how the fight got made in the first place. That's just where his mind is stuck at this point for Nick Diaz. A good fight for him next. Well, where's he going to fight? I can't imagine any 170-pounder is going to take it serious that he's going to show up to fight at that weight class. To me, why not? Well, okay, I was going to say why not show up at 185, but at this point, if you go back even just 5 or 6 years ago, the 185-pound weight class, you had a few guys that were big. Anderson Silva was always big for the division. not crazy big, but big. And Chris Weidman and Munoz back in the day. You had some big guys in the division, of course, Luke Rockhold. But then you also had many of the other guys were a little more, not quite as large. Not welterweights, but on the smaller side of middleweight, where now you've got huge dudes, whether it's Joaquin Buckley or whomever, that is Buckley fighting at 170 now? It's hard to tell. I can't remember now. But there's several. Just the division is packed with guys that are really big, and I don't think those matchups would be great for Nick. But how about Nick versus Khabib? Would Khabib come back for that? I mean, that would be Khabib's second big pay-per-view. That one would sell. I think it'd be a little bit too much of a circus fight to pique Khabib's interest, unless Khabib was looking to get a little... And, look, Khabib's never going to make 155 pounds again. As Daniel Cormier accidentally let it slip the one time. When Khabib was fighting, he walked around at over 200 pounds. It was very hard for him to make the weight. So maybe they meet somewhere to 175, or say it's going to be at 170, then fight at 185. It wouldn't make a difference to Khabib with Diaz. But it's very far-fetched, but that'd be a fun one. That'd be a real fun one. At least to think about. It probably would just be Khabib taking him down, and then Khabib's not letting him back up, and Khabib's very... I don't want to say cautious, because that's not what it is. He's so technical with his control. Any chance of the jiu-jitsu is pretty much nullified by the way Khabib approaches the ground. Michael says, better chances of Nick versus Conor. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Conor's going to probably throw himself in there. And to me, Conor, as far as who he should fight next, I don't know. It's not fair to say that I'm a little sick of Conor when I know Cavassier is working on a 3-part series about McGregor's psyche that'll come out over time. But I don't even want to think about Conor fighting. Everything Conor's doing, I think what Conor's doing now with the way he's being so commercial, I get it. I understand what he's doing. And he's turning every post into a paid advertisement. To me, it's gross. It's unseemly. To me, it was more understandable why he threw a hand truck through a bus window. I'm not saying that was better behavior. That was actually illegal behavior, and he was arrested, and rightfully so. But I don't want to see Conor in a big fight. I want to see Conor fight a dude in the proper weight class, not a top 5 guy, not a title fight, not Dustin Poirier, not a circus fight, not a Masvidal or one of these, for some made-up belt. Let him fight Dan Hooker. Let him fight Makhachev. That'd be, to me, that's until Conor comes back and just has a normal, regular fight, not some weird, now he's going to fight Cowboy at 170, until he reestablishes himself as an actual normal fighter. I'm not so interested in fantasy matchups with him. Because to me, it's only fun to fantasize about crazy matchups with guys who have a solid career going, that everything else is taken care of. Sort of like you can go out on a date with your wife if you've got a babysitter for your kids. Well, Conor's trying to go out in this little metaphor. He's trying to go out and kids take care of themselves. Not a good idea. Diaz versus Rockhold, Tyler says, hey, great one. Yeah, that's a good... And Rockhold's got the big fight coming up. I think that's on the New York card with Sean Strickland. And Strickland's one of those dudes as well. He was on my radar from his first fight in the UFC. For whatever reason, I'm sure you all have that as well, just some fighters hit you and something about them sticks. And you just always get a little interested when you realize they're on a card that's coming up. Of course, now Strickland's really on a nice run, and it'll be interesting to see how far he can go. And mentally, I think this is a horrible matchup for Rockhold, because Rockhold has such a difficult time communicating. It's not so much it's expressing himself. The difference being the emotion. He speaks quite well for himself when he's just saying something he's thinking. But when he's feeling something, it seems to me, that's when Rockhold ends up saying some really weird shit. And he says some of the weirdest. And I think Strickland's going to bring that out in him. Khabib still injured. He got jumped a few weeks. What? I didn't hear that. I think you're trying to... Yeah, kind of trolling a little bit there. Yeah, it's kind of funny. If anybody was jumping anybody for their political opinions, it'd be the other way around with Khabib, that's for sure. All right. Other question. McFatsack says, soul-wrenching to watch as a longtime Nick fan. He did manage to keep it interesting for a while, though. Just hope the payday was nice and worth it. Yeah, well, I'm sure he got paid. Or he wouldn't have been there. That's one thing we know about Nick at this point. At some point during the negotiations, he was happy with the contract. He might not be next week, but he was at some point. And to me, it seemed more like Nick was coming back. It wasn't about the money. I didn't hear him talking about the money. A lot of the old gripes didn't seem to come out during this cycle, this fight cycle for him. It seemed to be much more of, well, when he was asked directly, it was proposed, you coming back to reassert yourself in title contention or this or that. In his own roundabout way, he came around to talking about teaching and his kids and, his kids that he's training at his fight academy. I think he wants to show the guys how to do it. I think that's part of it. I think he wants to support his brother by getting back in there. Oh, one of the things that I found really interesting, I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but during his interview in the Octagon after the fight, Nick said 3 or 4 separate times when talking about the fight with Robbie and the way it went, he said, I had it coming. And each time it was a little bit different context. And so it's a little hard to tell sometimes when somebody says something like that, if they just got their phraseology a little bit not as perfect as they could have, or are they really expressing something and it's just kind of coming out like I had it coming. And I can't be sure, but I did wonder if part of what Nick was talking about or feeling in that moment was he kind of had to pay some dues. He'd been out, and that was part of the context, is he'd been out 5-6 years, and he had a beat down coming. Even though he has difficulty expressing some of his thoughts at times, Nick is really smart when it comes to the fight game, and not just inside the confines of the fight, but how the game itself works. He's strangely attuned to aspects of the fight game that most fighters never think about. I never think about. Nick he's a real forward-thinking or outside-of-the-box thinking dude. And I can imagine with his very honorable Bushido martial arts centric philosophy of life, that if he was thinking about another fighter who took that much time off and was going to jump back in to the top, close to the top of the main card of a pay-per-view, it's like, yeah, you expect that dude to take a beating. And he didn't exempt himself from that. So I found that extremely interesting, for sure. Other questions? Craig Mills asks if anybody would like to see Tony versus Conor. Yeah, well, that'd be a real fight. That'd be, well, yeah. It was definitely a fight that when Tony was clearly at the top of his game and, from my perspective, at the top of the division, even when he didn't have the belt, it was never going to be a fight that Conor would take. I think Conor would still be a little hesitant, but much more likely now that Tony doesn't have quite so many, or hasn't shown to have quite as dynamic of a skill set. He's not being as successful with the grappling and well, any of it recently, but particularly that. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it might be a little unseemly in Conor's eyes because, feasting on a guy. He caught slack for the Cowboy fight. I think now it'd be double with Tony. Like, okay, even though Conor's coming off a bunch of losses, at least he can tell himself a narrative about how those losses happened and, taking a page out of the Diaz book. Well, they weren't really losses, but to swoop in and play vulture over a scuffling Tony Ferguson is maybe not what Conor would see as honorable at this point. Because Conor has his own sense of honor. Now, he isn't like Nick Diaz, who's always within that mindset. He doesn't let himself out of it. He might have his own little loopholes, but he's always true to that. Conor is a lot more situational with his sense of his own personal sense of honor. At least it appears to be that way. Super Skunk says, no trolling. Khabib was limping after an event he attended. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. That'd be interesting. I know Khabib normally rolls with a pack of dudes and doesn't go places where he's not going to have the advantage. And why would he? Why would he? He's not like a guy that goes out to clubs. So if he's going somewhere, he's going to an event that's for him or for something that he supports. And any of those types of events, he's always going to be the hero. He's not going to be put in a strange situation. So that'd be interesting to look up on or look into. Yeah, and as far as Phil points out, he loves Tony, but he's not sure about that matchup with Conor. Yeah, I don't think it's great for for Tony at this point either. I don't think Tony should be put in the most highlighted fight. Let him fight. He still needs to fight somebody around maybe the bottom half of the top 15. But it's more the placement on the card that I'd be concerned with Tony. To me, Ferguson, his next fight will determine, whether he's relevant in the division or not. And just the fight should be enough. He doesn't need to be the spotlighted. He doesn't need to be in the spotlight for the card. Let him fight. If it's a pay-per-view, let him be the curtain jerker for the main card. Or if it's... And I think for Tony, if you've got Tony, you've pretty much got to put him on a pay-per-view card because he's paid off so many times. And okay, if you've got a starting pitcher and he's kind of stumbling and he's, you might shift him around in the rotation to give him a little more time off or to give him some slightly easier matchups potentially, but you can't yank him out of the lineup or you've got no shot of him ever getting his game back. All right. Matt King saying Connor's looking too thick. 155. Yeah, with Connor, it's always surprising because sometimes he looks so huge and then you see another picture from basically the same time period and he's like, it's more difficult to tell. And Connor loves to take pictures of himself looking big. I guess we should be thankful that Connor wasn't born a larger man because I think his ego would be even crazier if he was, a natural 185 or a heavyweight or something like that. It would be just crazy. The fact that he's limited by size, he can't call out guys above 170, and it's crazy that he called out some of the welterweights that he did. But I think Conor is toying with the idea of 170 because he doesn't want to take one of these more normal fights at 155. And 155 has some interesting prospects, but they're not that far along in their development. So at the top of the division, lots of talent. But as you start to get down beyond the 5-6 ranking, it's the division lightweight isn't the premier division. It's not even the second best. I think it's maybe the fourth best division. Definitely 135 is the best. I then say 145, then 170, maybe 150, probably 155 at that point. But there's a lot. Some of the more interesting prospects are in other divisions still, even if those divisions overall aren't quite as deep. Just thinking of 205 and 185, guys like Yuri Prokaska and Chimaev when he comes back, and there's just not a lot, but there's a good handful, 5, 6, 7 guys that are potential transcendent champions in the making in some of those other divisions, and I don't think there's anybody of that ilk at 155 unless it's Oliveira. All right. Let me get through a couple more of these fights. The Curtis Blades, Rosenstruck. That's Curtis is definitely having a difficult time facing the punch, which is understandable. It's his one kryptonite. He's so much better. He is quite well-rounded, particularly for a guy who was so unidimensional at the start of his career with just the wrestling and not even very good ground and pound in the beginning. He was able to develop quite good ground and pound, and over the last 5, 6 fights of his career, particularly with the Dutch gentleman, you guys know who I'm talking about, likes himself a little bit of horse meat once in a while. Don't know why I'm not remembering his name. Anyways, but I think after, my guess was Curtis could compartmentalize the losses to Ngannou because, it's Ngannou. I got knocked out twice or knocked out once, and then the fight stopped because of an eye closing the first time. But that's Ngannou. That can happen to anybody versus him. The Derek Lewis, I don't think Blades thought in a million years he was going to lose to Derek Lewis, even knowing that Derek Lewis had that kind of power. But once Rosenstruck was able to land a few good punches on him, particularly that second round, I had Rosenstruck winning the second round. Because Blades did nothing the first 3 minutes of the fight, or the first 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes of the second round on the feet. Rosenstruck busted Blades up. He didn't land a ton of strikes, but everything he landed was very effective. And then when Blades got him down, Blades did exactly zero. He was able to pass to not side control. I don't think he got to side control on Rosenstruck. I'm not even sure if he got out of the guard, but he might have gotten one leg over. So, but still, he didn't land any strikes. Of course, DC he's a wrestling stan. It's understandable. And I love DC's commentating. He does a good job. He's better with Rogan than he was with Felder. But Felder, I thought, was better tonight. Felder's coming into his own. But then maybe I'm just being optimistic because the fights have been so good over the last long stretch, and tonight was a culmination of that. So Blades was able to get it done, but I don't see how Blades can. Certainly, he's never going to. It's going to be a long time before he gets another shot at Ngannou. I don't see how he handles Cyril Gane and pretty much even Stipe. Guys that have too much power and the ability to avoid the most obvious wrestling, are going to be a hard time for Blades. He's beaten all the other guys, though, so he's in a funny spot. One thing I will say for Blades, beyond the fact that he powered through and he got the win, that was the main thing, he seems to be growing into his man body. For the longest time, even though he had this big frame, he didn't carry a lot of extra fat, but what he had, he looked more like a kid, the way a young guy kind of carries baby fat, and he's just not quite gotten his man body going yet. Blades is 30 now, and maybe he's pushing the physical aspect of the training a little more as well. The Andrade fight, I already talked about that. I thought that was really great. Marlon Moraes versus Merab Dvalishvili. What a fight, right? And I went back and forth in my mind on this one as well. Again, since I don't take a bettor's approach to watching fights, I didn't break it down that way. But looking at the two individuals and just taking all the information we have about both of them, well, all the possibilities played out in this one fight. The possibilities of Merab just dominating him with pace and with pressure and with the grappling, and he'd take him down 50 times if he needed to. Also, that Marlon would be able to catch him with something. And beyond just catching him with something, being able to put a string of combinations together, those things played out. From the start of the fight, I was surprised that Merab had a little bit of, I don't know what you'd call it. He had some, I suppose it was just respect for Moraes as a top fighter and a dude who's dangerous. But Merab's not exactly the kind of guy that blushes in the face of danger. Yet he came out and seemed to be a little more disciplined with a game plan of, look, eventually I'm going to do what I want to do. I don't need to rush right in like a madman. And I didn't know that Merab had that in him. Some of those guys, you think of a Clay Guida or something, guys who thrive so much on their energy and their state of mind and just redlining the whole time. It's really difficult to start a fight out pacing yourself and just being patient. It's a hard thing to do when you're the guy who goes all out. And Merab was able to do that. Now, he did get caught and damn near got finished. Again, Keith Peterson shining through. He's getting these opportunities and time again showing that, as Anik says, he's no nonsense, but he gets it right. And the week before, I can't remember which fight it was, with the fence grabbing, Peterson was on it. He said something kind of quiet. He slapped the hand once, and when the dude grabbed it again, stops the fight and takes a point. And it was a tough spot to do that in that fight because it was close. He's not afraid. I think Keith Peterson has the right mindset because Peterson knows he's never going to be a cool guy. He's never going to get the love that a Herb Dean or a Big John or even Mark Goddard tries to get for himself. So he's not concerned about the public. The dude doesn't even have a Twitter account. You basically can't even find a picture of the guy online. So I think he's in there completely focused on, this is the rule book, I'm going to apply it. And if somebody makes me take a point from them, it's not really my decision. I know when I'm supposed to take the point because this thing is happening. So I'm not injecting myself into the fight. I'm making sure the fight's fair and safe. And no nonsense. So big ups to Merab. This was one of those watershed fights, I thought, for him. Because it could have gone the way... Sterling already had the watershed fight with Moraes. So, and remember how that went. That was head kick. And, Sterling's sleeping with the Angels. I believe that was the fight that he, not to laugh, but that he did the dap in his state of unconsciousness. I think that was the one. But Merab, he passed it, I would say with flying colors. Yeah, he got caught. But I don't know anybody who was as hurt that I've seen get as hurt as Merab and then maintain, once he could get the fight turned around, full cardio. Crazy. Dude's a problem. I wasn't sure where his ceiling was, but I suspected it was at about that 12 to 14 range in the ranking, particularly at 135, which is probably, I don't know what, 30%. It's not just the best division. It's starting to lap the next best division in my mind. It's that deep. And yet, clearly, Merab's he's not found his limit at this point. He's definitely a top 10 fighter, even in this crazy division. Let's see him against Corey Sandhagen next. Let's see him, it's a murderer's row and a matchmaker's delight, that division. Let me look at some of the questions. The phone is open. Anybody wants to make a call. I know it's pretty late. We'll wrap this up here in a little bit. Not so bad for me here on the West Coast, but definitely our brothers across the pond and even on the East Coast getting a little late. So Dan Hooker versus Nasrat Haqparast. Very good fight. Everybody knows the story of both guys, both classy guys. For me, Nasrat, guys that come in with a lot of hype and then the hype continues, but I don't see what other people see. In my mind, I think about it, they're in my mental probation. Like, I'm ready to see what other people see, so I'm sort of giving them the benefit of the doubt. I did that with Darren Till. He never got out of the probation. Till is what I thought he was. Eventually, other people may or may not come to understand that. I was wrong about Israel Adesanya. I thought his ceiling was not a lot lower, but I thought a contender, but not a guy who was going to do what he's done. So when Israel came in and he wasn't knocking guys out early in his career and he was having trouble with guys he shouldn't have been having trouble with, I put him in that little probationary period. Well, that's where Haqparast has been for me. Because I just haven't, even though you see spots, it's like, yeah, the dude has some nice counters. He's got natural power. He seems to also have a natural sense of the flow of things at times. but I've not seen him be able to be consistent. Like when he's the one in charge of a fight, in fact, I can't even say that because unless he counters somebody, gets the advantage and hurts them and then finishes it out, he's never in control of the fight. He doesn't know how to control the fight. Now, maybe we saw him turn the corner tonight a little bit with that in the third round, where he finally came out and was trying to push Hooker back. And that's when he started to see some more success. I'd like to see Haqparast go to a different camp. I think it's really difficult to be training, particularly right now up in Montreal. They're not quite as draconian as the poor bastards down there in Australia and New Zealand, but from all reports, pretty close in Montreal. Like, you can't do actual training. And, I think Firas is one of those coaches who's proving to be really, really good for a certain amount of time, and then the fighter needs to move on. You see that from coaches in team sports, where they can pick up a team, they make the team much better in a very short period of time. A lot of times they can get them a lot better with the fundamentals, but then they either come up a little bit short of winning a championship and it takes a different kind of coach to get them over the edge, or they just don't have the sustained run. I mean, outside of GSP, Firas has never been able to have that kind of success. And I'm not comparing it to who's going to be as successful as GSP. I don't mean that. But he's not had any success with some of these guys. All right, we got another call. Hello, you are live. What's your name and what are you thinking?
I want to go ahead and talk about Kevin Lee being a possible contender for Nick Diaz.
Oh, that's outside of the box. What made you think of Kevin?
Well, I honestly think he's an overrated fighter to begin with. If we look back, let me see. He lost to Daniel Rodriguez, lost to Charles Oliveira, Gregory Gillespie was his
he won that one, but that was the knockout.
Yeah. I think he was just trying to go ahead and catch him while he was on the rise.
So were you looking for a fight for Nick that maybe is more winnable, or because I kind of like that because Kevin does have a name. It would certainly bring some cachet, and Lee is still a bit of a media darling, so that it would bring a little more gravitas to the fight, even though Kevin's, pretty much on a skid.
Yeah.
And that'd be at 170.
I think with Kevin just having a decent name attached to him, it'd probably be the best solution for Nick. But there's really no connection between them. That would be the difficult thing.
Right. It'd be a strange call out. Certainly, you're not going to get the call out from Nick. I would say that if somebody put that bug in Kevin's ear, he might jump at it because he would think, well, if I could get the fight to the ground, I could really make some hay with that fight. But then again, Kevin's really not been able to do that most of the times he thought he could. So I would take Nick in that fight for sure.
Yeah, no, I would do the same thing, and I think it would make the most sense. But to match it up and to make it happen seems to be the toughest part.
In the comments, Phil Latardo says to you that you figured out where Kevin Lee fits in. So I guess you win the internet for the evening.
No, but I mean, what are your thoughts on Kevin Lee? I'm so curious. I think he's gotten lucky a few times, and I think we kind of started noticing him maybe around Francisco Trinaldo,
right?
Especially Michael. That's what really got him on the map. I remember that press conference. That's where he really made it shine.
Right. Yeah, people forget what a
early.
big favorite he was going into the match with Ferguson, because that was for the interim belt.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I didn't understand it. That was a fight that was about the most confusing fight I'd ever seen in the lead up, because I'd put a lot of time into studying Ferguson, and I didn't understand Lee, because to me his striking was so bad, his boxing was so bad. But you'd hear Rogan say, "Oh, he's using the shoulder roll," and all this. It's like he would show the shoulder roll, but I never saw him successfully use it, and he looked like a caricature. I actually think that Kevin Lee has such wide shoulders. He's got that crazy, it's 76 or 75, I think it's 76, 77 inch reach. And I don't know, he's what, 5'8", something like that. I think his shoulders are too wide to have the kind of pretty boxing style that he wants to have. That's why his strikes are so slow, unless he throws singles. When he throws whether it's a jab or a straight right, they're good strikes. It's the combos that get slow and very predictable. He's so much more successful with his kicks. That's what got him the win against Gillespie, was the big head kick.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And him training at Mayweather Gym did not do him any. I don't think that. I think he tried to pick up that shoulder roll, but he didn't do him any favors. And then it goes back to the topic of him moving his camp up to Montreal with Faraz. And then you have to go. I mean, you start to question. It's Faraz. He's very knowledgeable.
Yeah. But
I don't see a lot of wins from camp unless I'm.
No. It took me a long time to sort of admit to myself that's what I was seeing too with Faraz, because there are few coaches that I'd rather listen to breaking things down than Faraz. I mean, the guy's a genius, and to me, he's sort of like one of those weird geniuses you bring in to fix one small problem. And he works so much better when he's part of a team, like when he was part of George's team, and George was also with Greg Jackson. That was really helpful. But, we've seen the wheels fall off of guys with Faraz, and my guess is Faraz would be a lot better if he had a number 2. He's probably taking too much on, quite honestly. I think he runs everything. I think because he can run everything, he might just be stretching himself a little too thin as well, because he certainly has the understanding of the game. And he made Elias Theodoro a guy who got some wins in the UFC, and that guy had probably the least likely set of skills coming in. He had a little bit of athleticism as far as like a good physique, but awkward doesn't come close to to going far enough to describe Theodoro. I mean, the guy really had no business being in the octagon, yet he was able to pick up some wins, though they look strange, because Faraz gave him enough of the fundamentals. And I think we see kind of a similar thing with Faraz's kid brother. The guy doesn't have great athleticism, but he's got some really great fundamentals, and when he can keep the fight just within the purview of his preferred skill set, he's had some really nice success. It's just that as you go up the ranks, guys are going to pull you out of that narrow lane that you're comfortable in. So that'd be my thought. Well, I appreciate the call tonight, and I think you gave everybody a good chuckle there with the Kevin Lee thing, but it does sort of strangely make sense. So I appreciate that. That's good, and make sure to call back again. Thanks, brother. All right, we'll kind of wind it down here a little bit. Look at a few more questions. Counterintuitive says, Alexander V is one of those fighters with endless cardio but lacks power. I don't see him as lacking power. He certainly has shown the power at times. And he's got a little bit of a funny frame too. He's very squat, but he's got these long arms. And when he gets the hooks going, there's a lot of power. One, you're not going to knock. You're just apparently never going to knock Brian Ortega out. You know, the kind of beating that Max put on him and couldn't. The fight should have been stopped. You could have stopped that fight, in the fourth round, maybe even the third round, if you were really being, if you were projecting. It wouldn't have been fair to do that. But Ortega isn't a good guy to measure a guy's ability to knock somebody out. The Chad Mendes fight, and I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. I think Volkanovski is always playing a chess match out there. There's some of those guys. And it seems like the city kickboxing guys are very much of a piece that way. You know, whether it's Izzy and Volk isn't always down there, but Volk's that way. And pretty much, and Kai Kara France and some of the other guys. Pretty much everybody but Hooker. Hooker's just a goddamn fighter. Anyway, we got another call here. Hello, you are live. What's your name and what's on your mind? Oops, sorry about. Let's try that again. You're live. What's your name and what are you thinking?
Hey, what's up? It's Pat.
Hey, Pat.
How's it going?
It's going well. How about yourself?
Yeah, same old stuff.
Did I draw you in with that Izzy talk? Is that what got you to call in? I mentioned Izzy.
No, honestly, I didn't catch anything previous, so okay. I don't know if I'm going to regurgitate anything here, but I think Nick Diaz needs to hang it up. If you think he needs to fight again, I think you're insane. I think that was a terrible performance. I don't know if you went over this, but that was atrocious.
Yeah, no, we talked about that. Yeah, that wasn't my take. What was awful about it to you?
When they were on the fence, just exchanging punches, they were just tapping. Tap, tappity, tap, I'm just like, are these dudes friends? That's what I started thinking. I'm like, are they even really fighting right now? Like, they seem like friends. So I don't know exactly what it was, but Robbie was a little aggressive, obviously, but Nick didn't have a damn thing going on. He doesn't have a damn aggressive body.
I'm going to slow you down for a second, Pat. I'll give you time to answer back. I disagree with that.
Okay.
I'm interested to hear your full reasoning for what you're saying. What did you think about? Forget about the way the fight ended.
Mm-hmm.
We know that both Diaz brothers fight a volume fight, and it's tap tap, thud, tap tap, thud. And there were definitely a lot of spots where it was only pitter patter from Diaz, but I thought I saw several times where he was landing some pretty good shots on Robbie, particularly in the first round. Now, definitely towards the second round, Robbie was really, and this is what I said earlier, Robbie was really getting to roll with them and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But, Nick was able to land, and Jesus, I don't remember how many it was, but he landed something like 250 strikes.
Yeah, okay.
So I understand. Okay. I guess what I'm asking is, are you upset with his style? Because I don't understand why you're fervently saying he should hang it up.
Okay, let me give you the rundown.
Yep, go ahead.
So I'm 20, so I never actually watched Nick live.
Okay.
This is the first time. So I've known about him and everything. He's a legend, everything like that. And I've grown up watching Nate and stuff, and Connor, obviously like that.
Sure.
And so I was looking forward to this and everything. So I wouldn't really know what a normal lead up would be or anything like that. So I was full confidence, and Nick's gonna, get in there and he's gonna come back, And then I'm watching it, and it's like the energy, man, it's just not there. And let me tell you, I watched old highlights of him. He never fought like his brother Nate. He never fought like Nate, really.
Right.
Let's be honest. He was fighting like Nate this fight. So when you go and you don't fight for 6 years and you change your whole style up,
yeah,
I don't understand what happened there.
I would say go back. My guess, and thanks for being honest about, some people try to pretend they've got more experience with a fighter than
Right.
what they have. So that's a good piece of information. It makes
Sure,
sense
sure.
that there's so much love for a guy, and then he comes out, and you would expect him to be like Anderson Silva in his prime or something, or Ngannou, or just a transcendent thing. And that's not what you got from Diaz tonight.
Yeah.
So I would say temper. I don't even think your perception, because of where it's coming from, I don't think it's 100% wrong that you were expecting a certain type of fight and a certain type of fighter.
Sure.
And then he's not banging. He's throwing these softer punches. He's letting himself be up against the cage. Robbie walked him down the whole fight. There were several times where he kind of ran away. Those are things that typically fans and even media members will say, well, those aren't good attributes. You wouldn't call somebody, like you'd never see Carlos Condit fight that way, or you'd never see somebody who's universally...
Matt Brown doesn't fight like that.
Matt Brown, right. So to get inside the head of maybe the Diaz fans or the Nick Diaz army, it takes a little longer because it's a much more truly boxing-oriented fight style, where there are lots of guys who, like Max Holloway, very good boxing techniques, but he doesn't fight like a boxer at all. That's why he was able to jack up Kelvin Kattar, because Kattar fights more like an actual boxer, his approach.
True.
Different kinds of angles, and basically once he gets throwing hands, that's all he's going to do, whether it's Kattar or Nick Diaz for the most part. You're not going to get more MMA style striking where you're getting in the clinch, in and out of the clinch, using elbows, different kinds of defense, where you see with Nick, he does a lot of covering up. We don't see that in MMA because it's really hard to make it work for you. Most guys, by the time they're covering up like that, the ref's about ready to jump in. But over the course,
and there's also a lot of other stuff that can happen if you're covering up like that.
Exactly. So. Because once you start bringing in the knees, and if you're covering up too much, well, a guy just come right in and take you down. Because you're not attending your hips anymore. Where Diaz has this extremely boxing-centric style. And, it's a whole different thing to try to appreciate. And I'm not saying you should appreciate that fight if you don't want to. But if you do go back on YouTube or Fight Pass or whatever and watch some of... particularly Nick's fights in Strikeforce, and but Nick's always had weird performances, kind of like his brother, where he has success. It's just amazing how many times Nick looks like he's getting his ass kicked. Say like his brother Nate, even though they fight differently. Nate won. Nate got knocked around that first round, but we all know how that fight ended. That's prototypical Diaz style. And if Robbie would have not come in shape, if he would have taken something for granted, or if he had just gotten a little old, he wouldn't have been able to withstand what Nick was doing to him in this fight in that first round going into the second round. But it was Nick who ended up crumbling. I would say somewhat understandably because he's been out so long, but I would caution you on the that he needs to hang it up, because I thought he protected himself well, and I thought he showed himself for what he is pretty well in the fight, particularly early on in the fight. I had him winning the first round for sure.
I don't know about that. I don't know. Here's the thing. He showed really good defense, actually, at times. When his back was to the fence, when he was, I don't know what you call it, but he was like diving down when Robbie was throwing the hooks, and he did it multiple times, like swooping on down, bobbing and weaving and everything like that. And I was impressed. I was like, okay, Nick, let's go. Like, I'm seeing him, like, something's coming on, like it's starting. And then he would just go back to the touches and everything like that. And I love watching the Tony Ferguson fight, a Max Holloway fight, Nate Diaz fight.
Right,
but
right.
for some reason, this fight was different.
It didn't do it for you.
It was different, man. And let me tell you, I saw pictures of him with Nate like 6 months ago. They posted something on Instagram, and Nick looked pretty fucking good, like in shape.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened.
That was weird, right? That was weird.
Yes.
Because everything I heard and everything I saw, and I didn't see a ton, but I saw a few snaps, and he did. He looked really good shape, and he had full dad bod tonight.
That's weird. I was like, what happened?
The only thing I would, venture a guess is that maybe the stress of it did, that's one of his issues.
I was thinking that too.
That, if stress is getting to you, we all cope in different ways, and it's not unusual to find solace in food and weed, and those two things sort of multiply each other. So that could be it. I had assumed that he had always planned to fight at 185 and was just kind of gaming the system. But thinking about what you've brought up and whatnot, it may just be that it got to him. I would like to see him fight again because but it has to be he comes back within a year. I don't want to see if he's gone more than 9 months, 12 months. I don't want to see it again. But
let me fix my statement. Like, he needs to come back. I agree with that. He needs to come back soon. He needs to come back soon, and he needs to come back, obviously, in the right state of mind, where this doesn't happen. I'm saying the stuff everybody knows already, but he needs to show up properly, because this wasn't proper. He still showed up. He's still a Diaz guy. Still showed up. Respect. Right. Made everything happen for it to still go on, but this wasn't it. And I think he knows that too. So now he's probably at like this crossroads. It's like, damn.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
Do I just like not do this and just, and then he might regret that shit.
Yeah.
So maybe one more where he can just maybe get his shit together.
Yeah, and I think that's
believe in that.
Because you have to build up your momentum, and also think about it maybe in your own life. If you've put something off that you feel like you needed to do, but you put it off really long, it gets so much harder to do. And I think that was part of it with Nick. And then he finally just bit the bullet and did it. And it was, parts of it were not pretty. The fact that he showed up so heavy wasn't pretty. But we'll know. Your concerns will be answered. My concerns, a lot of the fans' concerns will be answered if he has another fight, because it'll either happen within a year or it won't. So.
Right. I just don't want to see a Nick Diaz fight where he just doesn't want to do this.
No.
Like, I don't want to see that.
No.
As a fan, that doesn't sit well with me. It's like, no.
Right. Well, nobody wants to see a guy, especially a legend, sticking around longer than they should, and I thank you for the call, Pat. I think it's all fresh on our memory, and maybe this was part of what you were feeling as well. If you watch the Evander Holyfield fight, you have some of these legends that are hanging on too long. Now, that's not what I saw with Nick. I think part of it, too, is that Nick has always been kind of his strikes always look slow. They looked really slow at the start of the fight, but I thought they picked up. And I'm of a mind that, we do cut Nick slack. I'm not a Diaz Army guy, but I like the Diaz brothers. It's more fun when they're fighting, and if he wants to take it on and do it and be serious about it, it's not up to us. It's up to him. I certainly would appreciate seeing him again. And maybe it's too bad that Condit retired, because that would be a great second fight for Nick Diaz. I hadn't thought about that sooner, because I don't think Condit would game plan the fight the way he did in the first fight, which I saw nothing wrong with. I loved that fight for Carlos. But anyways, thanks a lot, Pat. Good to hear your brother. Call back again. Appreciate that. Lyndon's RC is in the house. Good to see you, brother. Some other folks as well. So overall, I thought it was a great card. We've been having good cards it seems like we're on a really great streak and have been for a while now. I was, in the middle of, not in the middle, but towards the end of wrapping up the Hooker Hot Prost fight when Pat called in. And, yeah, kudos to Hooker. The Kiwis and the Aussies are just such nice people as a general rule. He really needed to call out his government officials, though. In his own nice way, he did. But, Jesus, if they ever want to get their country back, guys like Dan Hooker and Volkanovski need to stand up for the people in their country, because it's difficult in some of those countries for the people to stand up for themselves when the government says you can't protest. Well, how convenient for the government. I feel bad for countries that don't have a constitution, but I mean a meaningful one. So, but Israel Adesanya came out and said that, they're looking to, the whole team's looking to move to the States, and that would make sense. At least, if you're someplace that is so out of whack with, like, everybody's trying their best. I'm not criticizing, and I don't really have a political stake in the larger conversation. But maybe it's the whole down under thing. They feel alone. And being island nations, they just started moving in one direction, and it was difficult to put the brakes on. And but when you have no ability to live your own life, like you can't even leave your country, that's scary shit. That's not good. I wouldn't, if I had children, I wouldn't stay in a country that I guess that's a paradox, right? I wouldn't stay in a country that wouldn't allow me to leave. Well, I would try to leave a country that didn't want me to leave, regardless of their rationale. And I think a lot of fighters may start to do that if they don't get it corrected. I think it's a shame. I think it's beyond a shame that Hooker's now going to have to go another month and a half to 2 months before he can see his children. But anyway, what do I know? I'm not very enlightened with some of those things, perhaps. Alrighty. A few more questions. This Mike says, too many Modelos for Nick. One thing I was going to mention, let me know if you think there's any relevance to this. As the fight was getting closer, the fight card, particularly after the press conferences and the final face-offs, it was really apparent to me of how much of a home game this ended up being for Ortega, in the sense that when you had Nick Diaz on the card, he brought in a kind of fan. I mean, not just the West Coast and California and all of that, or the what's the term? The blue-eyed cholo in Brian Ortega, as some people call him. It's not just that dynamic, but the fight style, the heart. A self-described Mexican-American fighter, and a gentleman who called earlier and talked about the Slavics. That's a great thing. There's all these different ethnicities. And some ethnicities, maybe don't show as much heart. I'm not looking just at you, France. There's plenty of, and that's a country, not an ethnicity necessarily, but you know what I'm saying. And then others, like Mexicans and, dudes from Iowa and a bunch of Polish dudes and Slavics. And there's just some places, Turks, there's just some cultures, and I think it is more cultural than anything, toughness. Now, Australians, they fit that mold. Definitely anybody that's playing rugby is doing that. But I thought it was interesting, right at the tail end of the lead-up, that I thought if Ortega was going to be able to truly have his peak performance, it couldn't have been in a better setting, because he had Nick Diaz there sort of setting the table for him. And you heard, you had a little bit of booze for Volkanovski during the introduction. And, pretty cool reception. Now, it's in America, but Las Vegas isn't exactly America. It's so, when you have fights in Vegas, that's why when Connor's there, it's Irish, it's not America anymore. There's more Irish people per square foot within the Strip than you'd find in Dublin, because Dublin's a pretty diverse city. So Vegas can be a chameleon in that way. And when Max Holloway's fighting there, it's the Ninth Island. It's one of the beauties of Vegas is the way it can morph into all these different hometowns for different types of fighters. And you see it. A lot of boxing events are held, say, around Cinco de Mayo in Vegas, because you can have this great swelling of Mexican pride, and half the people might not even be Mexican, but it's like everybody's Irish on St. Paddy's Day and everybody's Mexican on Cinco de Mayo. And when Nick Diaz is fighting, everybody wants to root for that kind of pull yourself up by the bootstrap from the streets, but honorable dude ethos, and Brian Ortega fits in that. And I'd not really thought about him in comparison to the Diaz brothers before, so I think he got a little boost off that. I can only imagine that that's part of what must have helped him when he seemed to have nothing left at the end of the third, and then again coming into after the fourth round. Into that fifth, I don't know. I mean, heart doesn't go far enough to explain it to me. Purely a strong mental. It's more than that. It's almost like Ortega is of the mindset. So there's a handful of dudes we've seen like that. Ferguson fits into that really well, where it's like they don't, and we saw it from Volk too. It's like they don't have it in their mind how to give up. They don't even have that I can't say the word, synaptic pathway wired in their brain. Like that whole, I could just kind of turn my back a little bit and the fight would be over. The old Chael Sonnen trick that he talks about all the time. Nobody ever actually loses by rear naked choke. That's the way they give up. Now, that's not always the case, but certainly there's a ring of truth to that. So it was interesting that things came together that way for Ortega, and couldn't be more excited to see where he goes, though, see how he goes forward. And I don't think he converted any bigger of a fan than he did in Volkanovski. You could see it, and Volk even said it. He's got my full respect. And as I said at the start of the show, imagine how good Ortega could be if he became professional, because there's definitely areas where he isn't professional. And I wonder if this will be a turning point fight for Ortega, the way the Max Holloway fight was. Max was able to force Ortega to focus on following through with all the striking techniques, so that he could keep himself safe in more situations on the feet. Ortega always had danger in his hands. He could always take a shot, he could roll with a shot, but against a true technician like Holloway, he was shown wanting, for sure. Ortega was. Then he made himself better. He went away for basically 2 years, got a few coaching changes in that time period as well, and came back and looked as good as he could, as anybody could, against the Korean Zombie. Looked completely in control of everything he was trying to accomplish. Volkanovski's totally different challenge. He has some of the elements of a guy like Holloway, but he's also a lot rougher. That's probably the best thing, or the most, the widest description that applies to Volk is the dude is just rough. You know, whether it's his forehead colliding with yours or getting his elbows in there, he's just a dude that is abrasive in the fight, but he's also strangely technical and quite cerebral. He's developing, and he's only 33, isn't he? He just turned 33, I think, or is about to, Volkanovski. He's getting kind of close to the conversation. A few more big fights, big defenses, and you're going to have to say, well, Jesus, is Volk the best flyweight of all time? Now, I still say it's Aldo, and then Holloway, but Volk beat Holloway twice. If they face and they're likely to face again, well, you can't put Holloway ahead of Volk anymore. And, of course, towards the end of his 45 run, Volkanovski was able to dispatch Aldo as well. So, you know, as people were pointing out and asking earlier in the show, where's Volkanovski in the pound-for-pound discussion? Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but you've got to start thinking about it, and I think he is. I think he's fourth or fifth, just behind Usman at this point. Yeah, Irrational says Nick looked like he came in with a possible injury. Yeah, and not an injury to his beer drinking hand, though, because the beer belly was about the only injury. As somebody, Smike said, yeah, Nick had a nice beer belly. All right. Oh, Retro89 says, what do I mean by not professional? That's what Volkanovski was saying over and over. That's not my assessment. Well, I guess I did say that there are things that you can imagine Ortega isn't professional about. I wouldn't take it as far as Volkanovski did. That he really pounded that point. The things like not showing up on time. A person who isn't organized never truly understands the value of being organized. People who have horribly messy desks and all their files are in disarray. There's some people, some of the very smartest people, certainly that I know, but even famous smart people I've read about. Some of them are disorganized, some of them are organized. So it's not an indication of your talent or your ability or things like that. But if you can take somebody who has all these great attributes and then give them more discipline in other areas, because clearly Ortega's disciplined in all sorts of areas when it comes to jiu-jitsu and various parts of training, but if he could be a little more attuned to staying on top of the things maybe that he doesn't want to do, and he's really the one that is going to have to assess that for himself. And I offer that as the mildest of criticisms, because really I think it's mostly praise you have to give to Ortega. I'm just looking for the small things to get him over the hump. He's in a division with two dudes in top 10 pound for pound. You know, Volkanovski's there, but so's Holloway. You know, it's not like you can take Holloway out of the I know it's more classic to pick all the champions of other divisions first, but I don't see how you can exclude Holloway from that conversation. So when you are fighting in a division that's just that elite at the top, that in your one division you might have two guys in the top 5 or 6 pound for pound, and you're looking to be the third guy to enter into that stratosphere, you have to basically perfect everything you can perfect. So that'd be my assessment of being a little more professional for Ortega. So whatever shortcuts he might take, you know, showing up late or whatever, if he can, I'm not saying he needs to be a straight-laced, by-the-books kind of guy. That's not his personality. And you can overtrain. You can try to over-perfect yourself. There's plenty of examples of dudes who've limited their efficacy, especially in the big moments, through overtraining. And I don't mean that from a technical standpoint of exhausting their body. But I mean putting too much on their plate and not giving themselves mental time to relax and the physical time. Certainly Bisping battled with that. But, it's going to be fun to watch Ortega's journey. I mean, the dude's still young, still great. Feels good, Ben says, I score high in orderliness. Yeah, well, that's something I work on. I could be a lot more orderly. It's strange. The things that I'm detailed with and orderly with are extremely detailed and extremely orderly. And the things that I don't, pretty loosey-goosey. For the most part, that makes me feel good. That makes me feel more comfortable. If I was trying to be the very, very, very best in a very narrow field, fighting, then I would just, anything that touched that arena would have to be I think a better word than orderly or disciplined is deliberate. You can't choose to do everything. The saying, you can't have your cake and eat it too. I think sometimes people don't listen to that phrase literally enough. If you eat the cake, it's not there anymore. So you can't have it and eat it. You have to make a decision. There's finite resources, whether it's time or energy or mental energy, your bandwidth. So you just have to be deliberate, and because you don't want to force the screws down too tight, or everything just slips out the sides. Lyndon's RC says Volk is the best 145er ever, in my opinion. Yeah, he's right up there. MMA Grant says, why Aldo above Holloway? I probably don't believe that anymore, quite honestly. I know I just said it, but it's been very close in my mind for a while, and I haven't readjusted it in my mind since Holloway's fight with Kattar. Because to me, that Kattar fight was, chef's kiss, just perfect. That's as good as anybody can fight or has ever fought. And I weighted Aldo's career on his longevity and how dominant he was. And, going back to the WEC days, because that was really where I cut my teeth. I was much bigger WEC fan, because when I was getting pretty serious as a fan, that's, to me, the height, the last couple years of WEC. It was just amazing. So I definitely was probably giving more weight to Aldo's run from that perspective. And, but I guess I really couldn't make a good argument anymore. I think Aldo's very close to Holloway, but I think Holloway is starting to pull away, definitely with the Kattar fight. And if we were to see Holloway versus Yair Rodriguez, that would be an excellent opportunity to make the delineation between the two that much clearer. Yeah, MMA Grant says, not being organized, taking PED, dogging trainers, that's unprofessional. Yeah, definitely. Definitely the PED thing, because he was straight up cheating, and he knew he was. I don't know why. To me, he's sort of maybe the Andy Pettit of MMA drug cheats. It's like everybody knows he did. Everybody knows he was deliberate about it. It was intentional. He got caught. And then for whatever reason, fans didn't hold it against him. And I don't know. I guess in my mind, I think, well, Ortega's not a drug cheat now. Like, he was looking for a shortcut and he got caught. But I could be wrong about that. I don't really have a reason to think that. I'm just sort of predisposed. I wouldn't even say it's because I like the guy. I do like him, but I don't feel like I'll admit to my Carlos Condit bias. And now that he's retired, that's basically the last of the fighters that I'm not able to at least try to control for bias. Because some fighters, Volkanovski's a guy that I've watched and I sort of pegged as a potential special fighter even before he got into the UFC, just based on some of his interviews. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, and it ended up turning out that he is quite a damn good fighter. So I can understand. I don't look at him. I try not to be a fan of his, but it's a fine line between, because if I become too much of a fan, then I can't dig any deeper. It's like getting a present and it's all packed up with all sorts of the filling, all the there's a bunch of something else in the box, but it's all the paper in there first, or all the packing peanuts and whatnot. And when you become a fan and you dig into somebody, it's only packing peanuts. You can't get a hold of anything else because you're not, or if you're watching a fight and you only focus on one fighter, it's really hard to score the fight because you don't really see all the things the other fighter's doing. And for me, I have to be super deliberate or I fall into those traps. But what else we got here? Feels good, man. Says Nick and Nate have always looked skinny fat. Maybe because their lifestyle translate to high estrogen, therefore storing more fat. Well, I don't. What about? Oh, because they're endurance athletes. Yeah. Well, there's also the genetic aspect. A lot of Hispanic dudes can be in perfect shape and they don't have six-pack abs, and then there's other dudes, they fall out of bed and boom, six-pack abs, or they don't have to work super hard. One of the better examples was Herschel Walker, who had never lifted weights in his whole life until like his 5th or 6th year in the NFL. Like some dudes kind of have it. And there's all the different body types as well, beyond the ethnic differences. Yeah, mentioning that Feels Good Men says in the lead up to other fights, he felt the fights really made him feel Volk, whereas that he was boring. Yeah, I never understood that. But again, I often wonder, is that my bias because I pay a little more attention to him because I've been paying more attention to him. As they say, those who have much will be given more, and those who have little will, be given less, or however that goes exactly. That's how it works with our attention. The things we put our attention on get more of our attention, and we want to give it more of our attention. So I've always liked the nuance of Volkanovski, but it's the sort of the paradox. He's nuanced and he's quite cerebral, but he's also like a dump truck, or I think it is the hooker position that rams through in the rugby. I watched a little bit of rugby when I was a kid and stuff, but I don't have much knowledge on it. I had a buddy who played for a few years. Damn, even on just the club level, they're all animals. They're absolute animals. I always thought hockey players in general of the team sports were the toughest dudes. And they're like 1,000 times tougher than basketball or baseball players. But rugby, they've got it on anybody, from what I've seen. Bailey Griffin says, I'm a big Volk fan from Melbourne, but I'm wondering, where do you think his reign ends? I'm seeing him be champ for a long time. Yeah, I do too. Your next question, you mentioned the Holloway trilogy. Max would be, I would say, the most likely dude to snatch the title back, but if Max wins 3, you pretty much have to assume there's going to be 4, even if Volkanovski has to go and pick up another win before he gets the 4th fight. So outside of Max, like a guy like Yair, he might pull something off. He could pull something out of his hat. It's MMA. Anybody can win any fight. Once you get to a certain level, anybody can beat anybody. But that's not really analysis. That's kind of lazy thinking. You take that off the table, and I don't know. There's certainly, whatever. There's a few guys absent from the 145 discussion as well. There's several guys in the top 10, top 15 who just haven't fought in a very long time. Yair being one. The Dagestani Abe Lincoln. I like the dude really well. He's crazy. He reminds me of a mad scientist. I can never remember his name when I'm talking about a bunch of different fighters. But you guys know who I'm talking about. He fights under Mark Henry. And anyways, somebody's... Oh, Giga Chikadze. That's not who I was talking about, but he might be. And I was a little cautious on Giga coming up as well, just because I need more proof from the dudes who come from the world kickboxing. Just the international kickboxers, because it's such a different skill set at the end of the day. It's so many of the techniques translate, but it's all the little things in between that you're going to have to do in MMA that you don't have to worry about at all in kickboxing, that can oftentimes turn an asset into a deficit. And I was a long time I've been impressed with Chikadze and was excited for him the whole time. But I wasn't sure where his ceiling was, and I'm still not. But very, very exciting. And damn, did he bring the passion in his last fight. And not just during the fight, but in his post-fight interview there in the octagon. And I love seeing that. I love those moments where guys come up and they're in that 5th, 6th fight of their UFC run. They're young, they're contenders, and they're starting to put their stamp on the division a little bit, or push dudes out from their path to get to the top. And of course they can't all make it there, at least not at the same time, but to me that's what's so exciting about the sport. Again, which goes back to why it's so important that we have good, stable, deep organizations, so that talent has a place to grow. And as they say, iron sharpens iron. And it's not just in the training where you get that. I'll guarantee Ortega will be better for having fought Volkanovski. Because I think it never crossed Ortega's mind that if he got a dude in the guillotine the way he got Volk in the guillotine in the 3rd, that anybody could ever get out. And the thing is Ortega was right until he came across Volkanovski. Now, Ortega's mind is bigger. He's smarter because of that. He knows that now, and you start to, you're naturally going to start questioning, well, what other assumptions that I thought were absolute do I need to reconsider? That's part of the growth process. It's scary. It can put you in a tailspin if you dive too deeply into it. You can't second guess everything, or you second guess yourself into immobility or mental paralysis. I don't think that's likely to happen with Ortega. He seems, well, for one, he's too chill for that. I think he can let things slide off a little better than somebody who is maybe more quote-unquote professional, who would obsess and not let something go. So, it's one of the advantages of having more of like Ortega's mindset. Steven Scott says, what's your opinion on Dylan Dennis? Did you see the videos from his recent bar fight? No, I didn't know he got into a bar fight. I didn't know he fought anymore at all. I don't know about Dylan Dennis. I don't know enough about the grappling world, the jiu-jitsu world. I don't watch, I'll see highlights of stuff and it's cool, but I'm not sitting down and watching old tapes of Abu Dhabi from '87, so I don't understand that world. So I don't know how well respected he actually is in that world. I've heard different opinions, and it seems like he's got some chops, but also he didn't have a long run in that world. I don't know. I don't think he could make it in the UFC. I think Bellator is the best place for him because they're going to protect him. They'll give him the MVP treatment as long as it makes, as they say, if it makes dollars, it'll make sense to Scott Coker. So, yeah, I haven't seen the bar fight. That's not surprising, though. Thoughts on folks saying he wants to move up to lightweight, maybe challenge for the belt. Yeah, I was actually thinking the other day about how many guys, just how sad it is that Khabib packed it in, before he even really hit his prime. That prime is, he's only 31 years old. There's so many more fights out there for him. And I thought Ortega would be a great fight for Khabib. Would Khabib be able to get out the way Volkanovski did? I think maybe. But if he didn't, he'd go to sleep because I don't think Khabib would tap. Not to a choke. But certainly Volkanovski would be a hell of a challenge. And as long as Oliveira holds the belt, I think it's all the more enticing to the 45ers, right? I mean, that makes sense, since that's the origin of Oliveira as well. I don't think there's any reason Volkanovski couldn't compete at a championship level, but I think it's best for him to have the long run at 145. You saw even tonight, there's a big height differential. And while Volk does have the long arms, he's got those crazy gorilla arms, he can be 5-6 inches shorter than the other guy, and he's still going to have 3 inches reach on him. But that doesn't always work out. It still is a little bit funny with distance. And if Ortega was a little better at intercepting guys coming in that middle distance, like he was really good at returning strikes at the outside or at the very beginning of the pocket, and with some different counters. That's where Ortega was having a lot of his success. But as as Volkanovski passed through that zone, and before they were in actual grappling proximity, that zone where it's more likely for a long-limbed guy to have to use his elbows, that's where Ortega was that's a blind spot for him at this point. But again, he has come so far with his striking, and I only have the expectation that he'll continue to get better. I mean, let's not forget how much a guy like Max Holloway evolved over his career. He had similar blind spots or weaknesses in his game, as they all do. It's just a very few are able to fill those in, and then on certain special nights, they have performances that are transcendent. All right. Bailey Griffin says, how long will it take for Max to recover after the Yair fight? Well, to be snarky, it shouldn't take him too long, because unless Yair is able to catch him with something fairly early, I would think Max would have his way with him. It's just my guess, though. I don't mean to cut out Yair's legs out from under him like he has no chance. He does. It's more that Yair doesn't have the kind of game. He doesn't have a sustained offense. He's got a bunch of tricks that work really well, but he hasn't molded it into a well-rounded game plan. And so if you step just outside of what he's really good at, he has a difficult time. I mean, it doesn't have to just be wrestling, though, either. We saw it with the Frankie Edgar fight. I mean, that was, it's a little while ago now, but we haven't seen Yair in a while. I mean, he may have filled in a lot of those holes, and so it may be a lot more competitive. So I'd like to see Volkanovski, at least while things are still all crazy in Australia. I think all those dudes should move probably to the U.S. or some country where they have freedom of mobility, and be able to make their own decisions so that he can have a proper training camp and fight more regularly. But if it's going to be difficult for him to come to fight anyways, it may be just right on the timeline for Holloway, should he beat Yair. All right. Oh, asking about Andrew Reed. Hey, brother. Are we going to get another Psychology of John Jones after he went to jail? That did cross my mind. I haven't read anything about it. The only thing I saw the actual cop report, and was able to make a few guesses. My guess is it's not as crazy as you might think. And it's not like I'm a John Jones apologist, that. But mostly I say that because John has no history of getting into fights or being physically abusive. That's not normal for him. That's not to excuse whatever he did. He needs to go through the court system. So I'll put that out there plainly. But I would be highly surprised if he left a bruise on somebody. Let's say I would be very surprised if he was that physical with somebody. It's a bad look because it's John Jones. He shouldn't be doing any of that shit. He shouldn't be doing anything wrong. Yeah, I'd forgotten, but he'd gotten into that other trouble. What was it, with the gun and all kinds of other stuff, and he was able to kind of get out of it and ended up never amounting to much. But yeah, as different things come to light, I might take a closer look and do a piece on him. Been thinking about him anyways, because, the whole, I'm going to heavyweight, when that contradicts everything I've believed about John Jones for a long time. I've said vehemently that I would be greatly surprised if John ever goes to heavyweight. I still am that way. At this point, he's painted himself into a corner, so if just the right opportunity were to come along, he would jump in there at heavyweight. But no, John will never go to heavyweight as long as Francis is champ. And at this point, the way Cyril Gane looks, he's not going to want to fight him either. So John doesn't have a lot of options. The fact that he screwed up again, that's not surprising. Because, you know, you can only stand in the on-deck circle so long and not lose your concentration for the game. And when John loses concentration for the game, you know, he ends up doing squirrely shit. And maybe now he did something, well, it's not as bad as T-boning a pregnant woman and running away. So, you know, it's he set the bar pretty high on some of the things he's done. But he's filling in the base now as well. So when you did your videos on guys like John Jones, have you taken psychology courses before? You're able to do so well reading people's body language. No one else does things like that. Andrew Reed. Yeah, I had, in college, I had psych classes and whatnot. I was interested in it. It was not my major. I was an English major and history. I was a double major. I had an opportunity, and still kind of play with the idea of doing a grad degree in psych, but I don't have the right personality to be a shrink, like to go to medical school and all that stuff. That just was never anything I was going to do. And I'm not interested in fixating on pathological behavior. And that's what psychology is from a academic standpoint, and for the most part from a clinical standpoint. All they do is deal with people who have issues. They're not, there's not a lot of research in actual psychology that's based on what you would say normative groups. And I think that's why I'm so drawn to the psychology part of fighting, is because to me that is a laboratory of a normative group. Now, they're outliers from the general population. They're fighters, and they have some extreme behaviors, but they're not pathological. Some of them, John, maybe, but as a group, it's a healthy group of people mentally, and much healthier in a lot of ways than your average people, because they have so much discipline, at least as we would judge health versus non-health mentally, in that, are you able to be productive? Are you able to basically your own self-assessment of your happiness and things like that? If you're falling into a basically normative range, that's a reasonable definition of mental health. So most fighters fall into somewhere on that spectrum, where when you're dealing with academic or clinical or even research psychology, you're not dealing with normal groups. You're dealing with pathological groups. And if you expect to see sick people, you see sick people. I was turned off by that, so I couldn't follow through. I would not have done that, where in sociology you get more because you're dealing with actual group, the psychology of groups, basically. It doesn't have to be pathological behavior that's being studied. Particularly, a related field would be economics. There's a lot of sociology in economics, and it's not purely based on pathologies and mental illness. It's based on just normative trends and behaviors and aggregates and all that kind of stuff. And I'm way more interested in that, because I'm interested in what's actually going on with individuals and groups of fighters, rather than just trying to sit down with somebody and help them. It's not even really what they do so much in modern clinical psychology, but it's not even really that they're trying to get them to be fully healthy. It's more like just trying to stem the tide of the worst things. It's very difficult. I think I don't think I could be a regular day in, day out, analyst for somebody, do clinical work like that. I wouldn't be able to leave it at the office, that's for sure. And I would search for solutions, mental solutions. The cognitive behavioral therapy, I think, is a really good thing for a lot of people. But, there's a lot of people you can't shoehorn them into that. They need medication. They need all, there's some people out there that have real difficult time. So anyways, that was probably a longer winded answer than you needed or were asking for. But no, a lot of the actual bedrock of my psychological knowledge is, some classes, but a lot of reading, and also something I've always been interested in. I always had a little bit of, if you want to call it a gift, I can sometimes see things that other people don't notice. I just see patterns. I can't help it. It drives me crazy. It drives some of the people around me crazy. You don't ever want to start talking to me during a movie, because I can keep my mouth shut during a movie, but if you start asking those basic psychological questions about a character, yeah, I'm way too interested in drilling down on that kind of stuff. I really don't do that so much anymore, because movies are based on fictional characters, or at least they're people who may have been real people, but they're fictionalized on the screen, where fighters are real people, and you can't truly predict what's going to happen. So therefore, when you make assessments, and then you do, to me, you have to make predictions. And most of my videos make predictions. I don't predict fights. I predict behaviors or patterns. So anyways, I'm going to take one more call here. Then we'll probably wrap it up really quick, or fairly quickly after that. So if you have any questions, get them in the chat. I'll address them. Hello, you are live. What's your name and what's on your mind?
You've been going on for so long, man.
I know.
You've been rambling, huh?
I don't know. If that's your perception, then perhaps I am. I'm just trying to answer some questions. Did you have a question or a thought beyond that?
I came to bust your chops. No,
That's
I came to talk about the man of the hour, Volk chop. You know what I think with the Volk fight is? He's usually way more smarter in there. Like, he was kind of getting into a dogfight. I think he just thought he would go in there and knock the dude out. Usually he's kind of like more patient, picking a guy's apart, leg kicks. But this dude, he wanted to go in there and put on a show. And he put on a show, all right.
Yeah.
So don't you think he was kind of a little bit, he wasn't his usual self, calculated. He's kind of more, taking a little bit more risk. Is that what it looked like to you?
Well, I think Ortega made him pay for some things, for sure. I think he definitely wanted to be more aggressive. He wanted the finish, and that was more of a priority than some of his past fights. He admitted as much. I didn't see him as reckless, though. He had a couple cuts, but overall damage, he was pretty clean. And I thought he was trying to balance aggression and being calculated. But I would agree with you. He was definitely leaning more towards the aggression, and he didn't pay for it. And other than the two submissions, he was never in any serious danger. So I think it's good for him. We don't want him to turn in. At least I don't want him to turn into a Mighty Mouse. A guy who's going to protect himself at all times and never put himself in danger. That's one way to go about fighting or Khabib or GSP at certain times. But it's hard to capture the imagination of the public and maybe to find out just how great you are if you're not willing to take risks.
Yep, he was kind of, I don't know, I'm just used to that Aldo Holloway fights where he's more of a counter fighter. He's kind of on the back foot, throwing leg kicks. Just more tactical. At this fight, he was pushing forward. He was the aggressive in this guy's face, walking him down, and he got dropped, and then he got slapped on that choke. I thought that was a wrap.
Yeah, no, I did too. I think from a game plan standpoint, I think you have to keep Ortega on the back foot a lot more. Whereas with Holloway, if you give him space, he'll fill it. Where with Ortega, I don't think it's as easy to predict how he's going to attack you. And I think Volkanovski wanted Ortega to be the one questioning himself. Plus, I think, as you said, he was being aggressive and really wanted to get the finish with this one. He certainly, left it all out there, particularly at the end of the third round, trying to finish the thing. But I would expect him if he were to fight Holloway in his next fight, I'd expect him to be as tactical as before, maybe with more punctuated moments of aggression. That seems to be on his mind.
You know what's crazy is Ortega's record. He's got one win in the past 3 years. He's got that Korean Zombie win. Then before that, he got beat down by Holloway. It's like the dude, he got destroyed by Holloway. He took like a 3-year break. And then he got a win over Korean Zombie. Then he's fighting for the title. Like, it was just maybe that was a mistake. Maybe he should have got some more some wins under his belt before he went in there against the champ.
Yeah, well, it might have been, but that's also a little bit of after the fact. It's easier to say that the dude certainly in one way was outclassed by Volkanovski, and he was definitely outclassed by Holloway, but he was also dangerous. Even at the end of the 5th round, I didn't think that he was never hurt, but Ortega was able to muster pretty good attack at points in the 5th round. One judge even gave him the 5th round. So I think he deserved the shot, particularly because who else were you going to put in there? It's a funny time with so much of the world being shut down and everybody having different issues. If you're not going to bring Holloway back in there, I'm not sure. If Cater would have won his matchup against Holloway, then you could put him in the title, but he didn't. So nobody else standing up. I thought Ortega was the best man available, and I think he made a very respectable performance for sure tonight.
He was the biggest name available.
Yeah.
They weren't going to throw anyone else. He had a big name. He's Mexican American. That always helps. But how about this? Merab Zili. Was that the craziest comeback you've ever seen? It's got to be up there, top 5.
Yeah.
He was good.
Yeah.
The dude really is the machine. Nickname's the machine. Dude's got heart. He got heart for days.
He does.
And his personality, his kind of, the way he carries himself, like just like the mood, his happy-go-lucky kind of mood, it exudes in his fights. It comes out in his fights, just the way he fights, all energy.
Yeah.
All gas, no brakes. That dude is
That's a good saying. That's a T-shirt there for the machine. Yeah, all gas, no brakes. That's good. Oh.
Yeah, that was and as far as Marias goes, I don't know what this dude's deal is. Like, he's got all the talent in the world. He's got all the physical attributes, but the Henry Cejudo fight just broke him.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of the Barbosa thing. If you have a very powerful or very exceptional skill set, but it's narrow, dudes that can pull you out of your comfort zone, all of a sudden it's really difficult. You know, if anybody could have ever stopped Khabib's takedowns, you know, he would have been a duck out of water. He was just so good in that area, you couldn't do it. And, you know, there aren't many guys who are well-rounded at everything at a super high level. You know, we saw it with Izzy. You know, if you can get him down, well, okay, then you can really control him. So I think with Moraes, if you get into a certain kind of fight with him, he's as good as anybody. But now the blueprint's out there. You don't just have to wrestle, but there's a lot of ways to sort of confuse him and whatnot and get him out of his rhythm the way people have done with Barbosa. It's the guys like Paul Felder who want to just fight him face on, where Barbosa's going to rise to the occasion more times than not. And so
yeah, you're not going to kickbox with Barbosa, otherwise you're gonna look like a fool. You got to get in there and get in the inside pressure, get him out of his comfort zone,
right?
Make these Brazilians work. That's how you beat Brazilians. You make them work, wear them down, and they break.
All right, man. All right, brother. I appreciate it. I've not been drinking at all tonight. You can't be drinking all the beer, my brother. Anyways, thanks for the call. Zabit, there we go. I was trying to say his name earlier on. Yeah, where is Zabit? And we'll just do a few more questions here, and we'll skate on out. I appreciate everybody showing up. Yeah, we're going a little while. We're making it happen. We're almost 3 hours, so I wasn't expecting to go that long for an after the fight one. Andrew Reed asks, and I don't need to go on a rant, he says, so that's good. I don't think I normally rant. I definitely can go on about something longer than other people are interested in hearing me go on about it. But asking about Tony Ferguson, is he okay mentally now that he's on a downward spiral? Thank you for the stream. You're welcome, brother. Thanks, Phil. My first take is, my guess is Tony doesn't think he's on a downward spiral. So that's his first layer of protection, although it might be short-lived and delaying the inevitable. Tony had his problems, and I never tried to get to the bottom of it. When somebody has legitimate mental health issues, I don't feel comfortable. You know, when it gets to the level of somebody professionally should be working with him, and potentially even serious medication or an intervention of sorts. No, I always try to steer clear of that. I'll put my fingers in anybody's mind that's just a regular person out there doing their thing. But when it gets to that level, I'm not qualified to do it, and I'm not comfortable doing it. And I don't think Tony's at that place. He seems to have tightened things up. I have wondered if Tony might spiral if things don't go well, but I don't think so. He seems to have grown in. He seemed to have his biggest problem when he was really in that birthing moment. He'd had so much success in fighting, but he was so misunderstood that the dude had, 10, 11 wins in a row and couldn't get a fight for the belt for a lot of different reasons. And even though he was clearly the number one contender for years and years and years, he didn't speak well. For the longest time, he wouldn't even do interviews. And then when he would do them, people would just say he was weird. And it's only been in the last few years that people have sort of gotten hip to, oh yeah, he's just a little bit of a different dude. But if you take one step back and enjoy him from that distance, he makes his own kind of sense. And I think during the time, the whole deal with not being able to fight Khabib, and then when Khabib left the country instead of fighting him at whatever that was, I can't remember the number, 236, whatever that was, a year ago in May, Wasn't it May? The first big fight back in Jacksonville. And Khabib decided to leave the country instead of fighting. So I think, and then Tony made the extra weight cut, and he took all this stuff on his shoulders. And quite honestly, when Khabib pulled out, Tony should have pulled out. But I think he got talked into being the company man, because Tony, if you go to a blue-collar, hard-working dude and say, hey, we need you to take one for the team, we need you to work hard and be blue-collar, they can't help but do it. Khabib doesn't have any of that. He has no loyalty to the American fan base. I'm sure he appreciates his fans, but he doesn't have any loyalty to the UFC. He's not going to cut his own throat for them. You know, neither is a Diaz brother, neither is McGregor. It's just business. Where Tony, I think Tony got a little confused. He doesn't, because it's not business to him. It's personal. And it's about loyalty. And I think UFC used that. They needed a headliner. And, you know, and Tony's no idiot. He was able to put two and two together. Khabib scooted out of the country, and Justin Gaethje had been training, even though Gaethje never did that before. So it was a bit of a setup, and Tony fell for it. But, it's a funny thing. I would say he didn't have good enough management, but I don't think you can really tell Tony anything if he's passionate about, if he believes he should step up and be the man. So I think Tony will be fine, though, if that's what you're asking. So even if it's not, that's what I'll say. I think Tony's going to be fine. All right. I am wearing down, though. I was up early today, cut trees, did a bunch of other shit, and then figured out that I could do the live stream. It's been a lot of fun. It was a great card. I couldn't not do it. And I did this one from the property, so had internet on the property, and it worked for 3 hours or so. Almost 3 hours. And I miss who wrote it. Oh, there you are. Stephen Scott says, think I can put video or movement on the screen. You just got an OLED. Yes. Yeah, I will. I had some of those things planned for when I was in hotels for a while. I had the good internet. Right now I'm trying to keep the bandwidth down. But yes, there will be video and do more like breakdown stuff. I just wanted to do something super casual, connect with, a few people, with you guys. Basically just share the enthusiasm for the event, for where the sport's at. But hopefully everything's going well with you folks. Thanks for staying up with me. Things are going well on my end. I've gotten hold of Cavassier. He's in the studio. He's gotten some work done. Shan't be long. And there will be videos out. All right, brothers and sisters, another successful live stream. I appreciate everybody coming out. And go Flamingo for dropping some cash on the PACA. Appreciate that, brother. If you've got ideas or want to reach out to me, go ahead and do that. The DMs or on the Twitters or alpacathosaurus@yahoo.com. Those are all good places. Take care.
We have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field. There is some sort of a harmony. It is the harmony of overwhelming and collective murder. It is not that I hate it, I love it. I love it very much, but I love it against my better judgment.